Well, I went on the date last night and survived, but Martin was acting very odd. To be honest, I'm officially scared. I won't go into details now because I'm still trying to figure out what it all means and I need to write it out. It helps me remember as things get foggy sometimes. As always, I had a nightmare after the date. I don't know what to do to make them stop. I thought more and more about Amy since posting yesterday. I haven't met her since that night, and Martin hasn't mentioned her again. I'm worried. I'm going to try tomorrow to see if I can find out anything about her. I've also been thinking about visiting the university lab where Martin works. He hasn't said where he works exactly, but I do have a picture of the view from his office he sent while we were messaging one day, and I know vaguely where he said it was. Martin will be meeting up with me and my friends for a second time to attend a few events in the city tomorrow. I'll see if I can get any information. I know many of you are wondering why I continued to date Martin, why I'm still dating him now. For a long time, I didn't see the connections leading to him, or maybe didn't want to. I woke up the following morning with a crook in my neck. It was stiff enough that I couldn't really manage to turn it far without incurring the wrath of my muscles. It was throbbing with a constant dull ache, but it was something I could work through. I got dressed and headed to work, thankful it was Friday. Around lunch, I began to think about the nightmare and couldn't get it out of my head. I opened up my Facebook and shot a quick message to Beth, asking if we could Skype again that evening. I also sent another message to Max and reached out to Rhett, Dylan, and Sydney. Shortly after that, I heard my phone chime. "So, what do you say, rafting?" I had forgotten to respond to Martin's message. The idea didn't seem quite as terrible as it had that morning. In the summer in my city, people flock to the river. One of the most popular things to do is to float or boat down it to a small neighboring town. Sure, I've been wanting to float down the river since I saw people doing it my first week. What day works for you? We agreed that the following Wednesday evening was best since Martin would be out of town through Tuesday, and made plans to meet up after work again. The rest of the day passed by quickly, but the pain in my neck seemed to grow a little sharper. That evening, I Skyped with Beth. She was doing great and enjoying life out west, though she had caught a small cold that had forced her to cancel her weekend plans. I also heard from everyone else, except Max, but again, I couldn't blame him. Sydney was busy studying for her veterinary licensing exam. Dylan was getting ready for a big volleyball tournament, and Rhett had been meaning to get in touch to set up a FaceTime date with myself and Nina to talk about their upcoming wedding. Everyone seemed okay. I was satisfied. By the time Monday came around, the neck pain was bad enough that I couldn't stand it anymore. I felt like Derek Zoolander. I couldn't turn left. Rather than endure a week-long wait for a doctor, I decided to go to the hospital. I was explaining to the nurse about the muscle spasms, stiffness, and dull throb when she pulled my shirt down in the back to have a look. I heard her let out a small gasp. "Have you fallen recently?" she asked. No, I didn't think dream falls counted. She brushed her fingers across the back of my neck, applying a little pressure. The pain blossomed, and I told her as much. "Oh, you have a large contusion here. We're going to need to take some x-rays," she informed me. The x-rays came back normal, and the doctor prescribed me some muscle relaxers, telling me to take it easy. I couldn't see the bruise they spoke of that evening, and asked Jan to take a photo of my neck. "Fuck, what did you do?" he asked, as I took off my jacket and lifted my hair. "Nothing. I have no idea where this came from. Let me see the picture," I demanded. Jan reached my phone to me, and the photo pulled up. Across the back of my neck was an ugly, deep purple bruise, about the size of a man's hand, I noticed. Jan then went to the freezer to pull out an ice pack for me with a little bit of worry in his eyes, telling me I shouldn't be so clumsy and wishing me a good night. But that night, another nightmare came. I was walking through a forest, bare feet pacing along down a worn-out cobblestone walkway. There was a faint, white glow through the dark skeletons of the trees, as though dawn had just broken. I felt warm, safe, at peace. Up ahead, two figures stood in a clearing, surrounded by a ring of tall, perfectly circular stones. A man stood in the center with his back turned to me, dressed in a white and green pinstripe suit and shiny white loafers. He was turned towards someone whose face I would never mistake. My grandmother. She must have noticed me too, as her eyes went wide and she began to shout something at me, but I couldn't hear her. Suddenly, the man reached out toward Nana, and just like that, she was gone. I let out a scream and he turned around, but I couldn't make out his face. Whatever darkness was in the forest seemed to pool around him, obscuring his features from me. Dozens of other figures began to appear behind the trees, but my vision was going blurry. The man held out his hand, beckoning me into the circle, but I shook my head as the colors of the forest began swirling and blending together. The darkness pulsed some more around him before shooting out at me, wrapping around my body and pulling me downward into a vast cavern that had opened where the stone path had been. I didn't know it then, but it wasn't the last I'd see of the man in the pinstripe suit. Maybe it was paranoia, but I glanced at my phone as soon as I awoke from the nightmare. 3:03 a.m. This time, there was no message from Martin. I wiped at my cheeks. Nana had been my rock before she died, just after midnight on New Year's Day 3 years ago. My mother had gotten pregnant with me when she was barely out of her teens, and my dad hadn't even made it to my birth before he'd apparently taken off. Or so the story goes. I don't even know his name and don't care to. To make ends meet, my mom worked a lot, so it was Nana and Pop who really raised me. Pop had finally died earlier this year in March. I sent a message to my mom, asking her if she was okay and telling her I loved her. I couldn't go back to sleep that night. The next day, I had my FaceTime session with Rhett and Nina. Apparently, their wedding plans have been going slightly awry recently. My dress is ruined. It's not even the dress I ordered, and the bridesmaids' dresses. Be thankful you're too far away and therefore excused from wearing one. They are vomit green, not blush, Nina moaned dramatically. The worst part is that the church is double booked. Either we move the wedding date, not possible, or we find somewhere else. Rhett and his family had insisted that they get married in Rhett's hometown church, like all good Catholic young men from small town in Ohio do. It's still fixable, guys, I reminded them. Your wedding is more than a month away. Nina scowled a little at me. Obviously, that wasn't the right answer. Look, I will help you guys figure it out, but there's something else I wanted to ask you about. Rhett, have you heard from Max? I've been trying to get in touch with him. I just want to know he's okay. Rhett and Max were good friends. In fact, Rhett had introduced us. At my question, Rhett shifted his eyes away from me. Max is not doing too well, Tara. I haven't heard from him in a few days. But the wreck and the breakup, it's fucked him up. Rhett responded. I felt another wave of guilt. Well, when you talk to him, will you tell him... You know what, never mind. It's probably best you don't tell him anything, I said. I'll tell him you were asking about him, Rhett assured. We chatted a bit more before saying our goodbyes, but I still wondered how bad off Max was. I made a note to question Nina about it when Rhett wasn't around. On Wednesday, I went to meet Martin. I'd honestly missed him. I hadn't heard much from him while he'd been on his business trip. We had decided to meet near a small park that had easy access to the river flowing through the center of the city. He met me right on time as always and swallowed me up in his two warm arms, giving me a soft kiss. We detangled from one another, and I sat by the riverbank as Martin pumped up his inflatable raft, refusing to let me help and insisting I take it easy. As we entered the water, Martin asked me a simple question that gave me pause. Have you talked to Beth recently? Yeah, Saturday actually. I responded, thinking back on it. Martin seemed quite keen on our conversation, and it was difficult to get him to drop it. I remember specifically wondering what the sudden interest in Beth was as he questioned me about how we met and Beth's life in general. I'm not sure how much I told him, probably more than I should have. Eventually, though, he dropped the topic, and we began talking about more normal things. I opened up to him about my grandparents, and he told me about the year he spent working on a farm in the mountains. It was a gorgeous summer day, not a cloud in the sky, and once again, the date was nearly dream perfect. Until the glitch came back. Here's the thing. This time, I glitched. It lasted about 2 to 4 seconds as I looked at my arm that was outstretched by Martin's own. The light bent and pulled around the skin of my hand, blurring out all the fine lines as my flesh blurred into the air around me. I thought I saw a very faint glow of pale colors around where my arm should be. Tara, you okay? I heard Martin ask from what seemed like a distance. Yeah, I'm fine. My voice sounded sort of distorted and I felt dazed, like I'd been hit in the head with a baseball bat. I noticed Martin's hands were trembling again. It was too warm for him to have caught a chill. I looked around and the scenery surrounding us looked different than just a second before. Where dozens of tightly packed residential buildings had just stood, there were now open fields and an old stone building that looked to be an old mill with a giant wooden water wheel off the side near the river. Hey, look, there's a monastery here. Wait, not a monastery. The one with the women. What's it called in English? Martin asked, pointing at the building on the left bank. A covenant? A convent, I offered. It didn't look like a holy place to me. It looked like a creepy, forgotten, old building on a riverbank. Martin sent me a smile. I couldn't quite interpret that strange gleam in his eyes again. Do you want to see it? We can look inside, have a picnic in the garden. He gestured to the small cooler in front of where we sat, cuddled against the side of the raft. He'd made it himself, apparently. No, I didn't want to see the creepy-ass old mill, convent, much less eat there. Not even a little bit. And yet, what came out of my mouth wasn't a protest. Before I knew it, I'd agreed. Martin was holding my hand as we walked to the old wooden door. The inside of the building was nearly bare. A few dusty old pews, candles and iron holders, burned to the end of the wick, and a small table at the front of the room. Martin had wandered off to the side, examining an old painting while I walked toward the front. On the table was a small statue. A saint, I guessed, though it could have been Zeus for all I knew of religion. It was old enough. Most of the features once chiseled in the stone were now indistinguishable. It looked ancient. I picked it up in my hand and turned it around. On it sat a set of numbers that were hastily carved. 3, 7, 0, 8, 1, 9, 2, 2. I dropped it like a hot cake, and a flash of something silver entered my vision. On the altar was a large knife, curved blade, bone handle. Before I could reach for it to check to see if it was even real, I heard a loud banging noise, like someone was striking at a door with a log, over and over. My ears started ringing. The noise was so loud I had to raise my hands to cover them. I looked off to the side where the banging had been coming from. It was a dark corner of the convent, and yet, was the darkness moving? It seemed to pulse, like in my dream. But there, at the edges of the formless black mass, was a slight glimmer of light. How strange, I remember thinking. I made a move, itching to find out what it was. Get out! A voice cut through the ringing in my ears. I couldn't distinguish what the voice sounded like, just that it existed. I suddenly felt pulled toward the door, like if I didn't get out right then, game was over. I ran out of the convent, throwing the old oak door open, collapsing on my knees in the dirt path outside the building. I felt someone come up from behind me and took a wild swing in their direction. Tara, what's wrong? Are you okay? Martin asked as he grabbed my arm gently. I couldn't get anything out. I think maybe I started mumbling at him. I doubt it was intelligible. Look, let's get some food, okay? Maybe that'll help you feel better. Martin was crouched down with me, stroking my back. His blue eyes were all concern as they peered at me. All I could do was nod. Martin led me to the small vegetable garden in front of the convent and went to go grab the cooler. I remember not wanting him to go. I didn't want to be alone, but he reassured me he would be back in an instant. He didn't lie. He spread out a blanket, unpacked the food, and insisted I eat at least a little bit. It did look good. I tried a bite of fruit. The next thing I remember, I was euphoric. The food was the best I'd tasted. The sunset, the most beautiful I'd ever seen. The water more clear than it had ever been before. Everything was perfect. When Martin told me we should start heading back since it was dark now, I didn't want to go and protested. But he insisted. So we got back in the boat and headed to the town. I don't remember very clearly the rest of the trip. Just that it was dark and didn't seem to take very long. Martin walked me to the train station, bought my zone extension, and we made our way back to the city. Before we got back, he officially asked me to be his girlfriend, and I accepted. The incident at the convent forgotten. And that night, like clockwork, the fourth nightmare came.